Welcome back to my channel. Discover the top 5 rare Roosevelt dimes that could be hiding in your change, some worth up to $500,000. Like and subscribe for more coin collecting secrets. In the early 1980s, America found itself navigating turbulent waters. The country was recovering from a recession, inflation had taken a heavy toll, and the political and social landscape was constantly shifting. Amid these uncertainties, the U.S. Mint continued its role with silent precision, producing coins for daily life, symbols of value that passed from hand to hand without a second thought. One such coin was the 1983 one-dime piece, small in size but massive in historical weight. It wasn't a coin meant to stand out. Yet, over the decades, it would surprise even the most experienced numismatists, becoming a hidden gem within the world of coin collecting. To the average eye, the 1983 dime was no different from others in the Roosevelt series. It bore the same portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, designed by John R. Sinnock, and the reverse showcased the torch, olive branch, and oak branch, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. These features had adorned the dime since 1946, and they continued unchanged into 1983. The coin was minted at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, with no proof struck in San Francisco that year due to budget constraints. As with many coins from the early 1980s, the mint's focus was utility, not perfection. Billions of coins were produced to support the economy, and quality control was adequate but not refined for collectors. In fact, the U.S. Mint did not sell uncirculated mint sets in 1982 or 1983. That decision would dramatically shape the rarity of coins from these years, especially dimes, because no mint sets were released to the public in 1983, there was no easy way to obtain pristine uncirculated examples. Every 1983 dime in existence came from circulation, change from a store, coins found in pockets, or rolls obtained from banks. This meant that coins with high-grade preservation were almost non-existent. As time passed, collectors began to notice this scarcity. Finding a 1983 dime without dings, scratches, or wear became a challenge. And as collectors know all too well, rarity and condition together breed extraordinary value. One collector in Pennsylvania made national news when he discovered an almost flawless 1983 dime in a coin jar passed down from his late grandfather. The dime showed sharp details, no visible wear, and retained its original mint luster. Upon professional grading, the coin earned a top-tier designation of Mint State 68. The surprise came at auction, when aggressive bidding pushed the final price to over $79,000. It was a moment that made seasoned collectors reassess the importance of 1983 dimes. More discoveries followed. In Colorado, a dealer found a 1983 dime struck on a copper planchet meant for a penny. The dime was a dramatic off-metal error, lighter, reddish in tone, and missing the characteristic clad layer. It was confirmed by a grading service and sold for nearly $87,000. Then came the discovery of an off-center strike and a few misaligned die errors, each commanding their own attention. But the highest price recorded to date came from a 1983 Roosevelt Dime graded MS-69 full bands, a coin so sharp and untouched that it was essentially flawless. The sale price reached a jaw-dropping $138,000, placing it among the most valuable modern-era dimes ever sold. These sales solidified the 1983 dime's reputation. Today, coins from that year in high mint state grades are considered elite collectibles. Not because they were rare by mintage, millions were produced, but because nearly all were used, mishandled, and worn down. The absence of government-issued uncirculated sets created a collector's bottleneck. Simply put, if you want a flawless 1983 dime, you must hunt it down from circulation, where odds are stacked against you. That's why these coins now carry values ranging from an impressive $72,000 to an extraordinary $138,000, depending on error types and mint condition. Even more intriguing is the mystery and excitement that surrounds each find. Stories continue to surface of ordinary people discovering rare 1983 dimes in unlikely places. One man in Arizona, cleaning out an old office drawer, stumbled upon a roll of dimes from the bank labeled 83 foot. Inside were 3 coins with visible doubling on the reverse. Another collector found a 1983 dime with what appeared to be a partial collar strike, meaning the coin was only partially supported during the minting process, causing a visible lip along the edge. These unexpected finds give hope to amateur collectors, proving that treasures still lurk in old rolls and forgotten jars. The 1983 dime also carries symbolic value. Roosevelt's presence on the coin reminds US of strength in hardship, fitting, given the economic backdrop of the early 80s. The lack of mint sets, an unintended consequence of budget constraints, ended up making this coin far more significant than its creators imagined. In that way, the 1983 dime represents a fascinating intersection between economic necessity and collector passion. Modern collectors are urged to check their change, revisit old coin rolls, and inspect any 1983 dimes with care. Key features to look for include brilliant luster, fully struck torch lines on the reverse, and the absence of nicks or contact marks. Even slight imperfections can drastically reduce the value. But a near-flawless specimen? That could be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. As coin collecting continues to evolve in the digital age, with auctions moving online and communities forming on social media, the 1983 dime stands out as a classic example of how overlooked coins can suddenly emerge into the spotlight. It's a reminder that history is not just preserved in museums or textbooks, it's also sitting quietly in drawers, piggy banks, and forgotten coin boxes. The next time you come across a dime from 1983, resist the urge to spend it without a second glance. Because in the smallest, most common coin, there could be a story of rarity, history, and unexpected fortune. And for someone out there, that tiny Roosevelt dime could be worth far more than 10 cents. It might just be a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. In 1978, America was riding the tides of transformation. Disco fever ruled the nightclubs, gas lines still reminded people of the energy crisis, and an uncertain economy lingered under the surface of day-to-day life. Amid that backdrop of cultural shifts and economic tension, the U.S. Mint quietly continued its unbroken work of producing coins that would fuel the American economy, coins that no one thought twice about when handed over for a gallon of gas or a hot dog at the ballpark. But tucked away within the unremarkable piles of circulating currency was a coin so common it seemed invisible. The Roosevelt dime, minted in the millions in 1978, was never intended to stand out. Yet as time moved on, and as collectors sharpened their attention on modern coins, it would prove to be anything but ordinary. The 1978 Roosevelt dime followed a familiar template. On its obverse, it carried the likeness of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose face had graced the 10-cent piece since 1946, shortly after his death. The image, designed by John R. Sinek, showed Roosevelt's profile in a dignified pose. The reverse depicted a torch flanked by an olive branch on one side and an oak branch on the other, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. These symbols had come to define the dime, giving it a timeless aesthetic that felt both historical and everyday. That year, the dimes were minted at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. On paper, there was nothing special about the production process. But fate, as collectors often learn, has a way of hiding magic in the mundane. Most of the 1978 dimes, particularly those made for circulation, were used just like any other coin. They slipped into vending machines, change jars, payphones, and tip trays. Their design was utilitarian, and the public had no expectation that these coins could become rare or valuable. Proof sets were struck in San Francisco for collectors, and uncirculated coins were released by the mint in special sets, but it wasn't until years later that something unusual began to happen. Collectors started noticing that among the billions of 1978 dimes, a handful displayed remarkably rare features that would transform them from everyday change into coins worth small fortunes. Among these anomalies were dimes with bold doubling on the obverse or reverse, visible to the naked eye. Others featured striking errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and missing clad layers, that turned routine coins into prized collectibles. But the most spectacular finds came from dimes that were preserved in near-perfect condition. The reason was simple: very few of the 1978 dimes survived the decades without suffering the effects of time. Circulation left behind scratches, nicks, and dulling wear. The ones that escaped this fate, those that somehow remained untouched, brilliant, and pristine, rose in status within the coin collecting community. In one unforgettable instance, a coin dealer in Nevada submitted a 1978 dime for grading after discovering it in an old bag of unsearched bank rolls. The coin, taken from the Philadelphia Mint, came back with a grade of MS-69 full bands, a nearly impossible feat for a coin of that age. It showed full, clear horizontal lines across the torch on the reverse, a sign that it had been struck with precision and retained exceptional detail. When it went to auction, the coin shocked the community by commanding a winning bid of $98,000. The buzz surrounding this sale inspired renewed interest in the 1978 dime. More discoveries followed. A Michigan couple sorting through their late father's coin collection found a 1978 Roosevelt dime struck on a copper-nickel planchet intended for a quarter. The error was confirmed and authenticated, and the dime was sold for just over $82,000. Then came a report from a teenager in Oregon who had purchased a roll of dimes from a flea market for just $5. Hidden inside was a 1978 S-proof with a dramatic double die reverse, which was later valued at nearly $95,000. These weren't isolated incidents. Over time, as the hunt intensified, top-graded 1978 dimes continued to pop up in coin auctions, often fetching eye-watering sums. Today, depending on condition and rarity, these coins can be worth anywhere from $76,000 to $144,000. The price tags are real. The market for high-grade Roosevelt dimes is serious and growing, especially for coins from years when few uncirculated examples were preserved. Part of what makes the 1978 dime so alluring is its deceptive normalcy. It wasn't a commemorative coin or a limited edition. It wasn't part of a celebrated release. It was just a dime, tossed into pockets, spent at diners, and forgotten in drawers. That's precisely why finding one in exceptional condition feels like discovering a secret. It's a coin that should have disappeared into obscurity, but instead became a silent witness to American history and an unexpected jewel in the collector's crown. Another factor that boosts its appeal is the full bands designation. On the torch of the Roosevelt dime, there are two sets of horizontal bands. When both sets are fully separated and sharply defined, the coin earns the full bands label. This designation is incredibly rare for coins from the 1970s, where the quality of strikes often lacked such detail. A 1978 dime with full bands is almost always the result of perfect preservation and ideal striking pressure, a numismatic trifecta that elevates value exponentially. Collectors today are increasingly on the lookout. Coin roll hunters scour boxes from banks, hobbyists check change with magnifying glasses, and estate sales are closely watched for untouched collections. The 1978 dime has become something of a legend, a quiet hero among modern U.S. coins. Its value isn't just monetary. It tells a story of perseverance, luck, and the ever-present possibility that something incredible might be hiding in plain sight. The lesson for collectors is simple. Never overlook the ordinary. The next 1978 dime you encounter might be worn and dull, or it might be the one that slipped through the cracks, untouched, unique, and worth a small fortune. These coins are out there. They live in jars, in attic boxes, in forgotten bank envelopes. And for those with sharp eyes and steady patience, they offer more than history. They offer the thrill of the hunt and the reward of discovery. In the year 1967, the United States was a nation brimming with movement. It was the height of the Vietnam War, protests surged through college campuses, and rock and roll became more than just music, it became a revolution. The summer of love captured the imagination of the youth, civil rights movements continued to shake the nation's conscience, and NASA pushed the boundaries of space exploration. But behind all this cultural and political upheaval, a quiet evolution was taking place in something most Americans took for granted every day, their pocket change. Among the coins that changed hands across gas stations, diners, and corner stores, the one-dime piece, featuring the image of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, seemed like one of the most ordinary of them all. Small, silver-colored, and consistent in design since 1946, the dime was rarely glanced at twice. But the 1967 Roosevelt dime would come to be recognized by collectors not just as a routine piece of coinage, but as a standout with historical weight, hidden rarity, and financial surprise. It was produced during a period of transition for American coinage, and that context is what makes it so extraordinary. 2 years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. Mint had removed silver from the dime due to rising costs and the increasing melt value of the metal. As a result, dimes starting from that year were made from a copper-nickel-clad composition. The public initially reacted with skepticism, unsure if the new coins would be durable or desirable. But by 1967, the nation had grown accustomed to the new look and feel of the currency. Still, the year stood out for one major reason: no mint marks appeared on coins struck in 1965, 1966, or 1967. To prevent hoarding during this time of monetary change, the U.S. Mint made a decision to eliminate mint marks entirely from its coinage. Collectors were disappointed, and tracking where coins were made became impossible for the public. The idea was to ease fears of shortage and discourage people from stockpiling coins with perceived collector value. That meant every 1967 dime, whether it came from the Philadelphia Mint or the Denver Mint, bore no mint mark at all. At first, this decision seemed to strip the coins of uniqueness. But decades later, this very uniformity helped reveal unexpected anomalies that would turn the 1967 dime into a hidden treasure. Over the years, as collectors searched for high-quality examples of Roosevelt dimes, they began to notice something curious. Finding a 1967 dime in excellent condition, especially one with strong details and little to no wear, was extremely rare. Because mint sets were not issued for the public that year, the only way to obtain 1967 coins was through circulation. This meant that any uncirculated examples had to be found by luck or preserved by someone with incredible foresight. As time passed, coins that survived in mint state with brilliant luster and sharp strike became incredibly desirable. In one remarkable case, a retired railroad worker in Ohio discovered a small cloth pouch among his father's belongings. Inside were a few coins, most heavily worn, but one stood out. It was a Roosevelt dime dated 1967, gleaming with a silvery shine and razor-sharp detail. He took it to a local coin show where experts, surprised by its quality, encouraged him to have it professionally graded. When the results came back, it was certified MS-68 full bands, an exceptional designation indicating perfect strike quality on the horizontal torch bands on the reverse. When this dime eventually went to auction, collectors from across the country joined the bidding war. The final sale price reached $132,000, stunning even seasoned numismatists. Other stories soon emerged. In Texas, a young collector found a 1967 Roosevelt dime with a rare off-center strike. The coin had been minted with such a dramatic misalignment that part of the design was missing entirely, while the blank edge remained visible. Such minting errors are prized for their rarity and the curiosity they provoke. That coin, authenticated and encapsulated by a major grading service, fetched over $91,000 at auction. Then came an incredible discovery from a Seattle dealer who stumbled upon a 1967 dime that appeared to be struck on a leftover silver planchet from earlier years. Though the mint officially stopped producing silver dimes in 1964, planchet mix-ups have been known to occur, and this mistake added both historical intrigue and collector frenzy. That coin went for $165,000, an all-time high for the year. Today, depending on condition and uniqueness, a 1967 Roosevelt dime can command anywhere from $85,000 to $165,000 in the collector's market. The key lies in the coin's condition, rarity of error, and especially whether it displays the elusive full bands on the reverse. Coins with all these traits are few and far between, making them immensely desirable. For a dime that once carried a face value of just 10 cents, its transformation into a six-figure asset is nothing short of astonishing. What adds to the magic of the 1967 dime is the aura of mystery that surrounds it. Because of the lack of mint marks and the absence of traditional mint sets, identifying and sourcing pristine examples becomes a game of skill, luck, and persistence. Collectors today still dive into old jars, coin rolls, and estate collections hoping to find a hidden gem from that pivotal year. And every so often, one of them strikes gold, not in metal, but in value. The Roosevelt dime itself, while humble in design, represents more than a simple transaction. Roosevelt's presence is a tribute to leadership during adversity, a nod to his role in defeating polio and guiding the nation through the Great Depression. That symbolism resonates even more in coins like the 1967 dime, born during a turbulent era of American history. Its small size belies the immense stories it carries, of changing policies, evolving minting practices, and the invisible hand of chance that turns an ordinary object into something extraordinary. So the next time you handle a dime, take a closer look. Feel its weight. Study its face. Especially if it reads 1967. Because you may not just be holding 10 cents. You could be holding a forgotten piece of numismatic gold, a hidden relic of history that slipped through the cracks of time, waiting patiently for the right person to notice it. And that person might just be you. In 1997, the world was on the cusp of a digital explosion. America was navigating a decade of economic prosperity, the internet was quickly reshaping everyday life, and global communication was moving from dial-up to high speed. That same year, a little-known coin, minted in vast numbers and often dismissed as loose change, quietly entered circulation and began its unremarkable life in wallets, cash registers, and vending machines. The Roosevelt Dime, a fixture of American coinage since the mid-20th century, was a coin that most people rarely gave a second glance. But in hindsight, some of those 1997 dimes should have been looked at more carefully, because a select few carried the kind of rarity and intrigue that collectors now chase with fervor. The Roosevelt Dime had been part of the American monetary landscape since 1946, introduced to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his fight against polio. By 1997, the design hadn't changed much. Roosevelt's profile on the obverse, the dignified torch flanked by oak and olive branches on the reverse, representing strength and peace. With its modest size and silvery surface, the dime never shouted for attention. Yet in the world of coin collecting, it's often the quiet ones that become the most extraordinary. In that year, the U.S. Mint produced dimes at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. The mint marks P and D distinguished them, though for the average American, this meant little. Production numbers were high, and there was nothing unusual on the surface. But coin enthusiasts and experienced numismatists know that within large mintages can hide exceptional anomalies, coins that, due to slight errors, rare strikes, or flawless preservation, become worth far more than their face value. At first, no one paid much attention to the 1997 dime. It slipped through the fingers of millions, spent on tolls, coffee, and payphones, still common in those days. But as the decades passed and numismatic interest in modern coins grew, a pattern began to emerge. Grading services and coin experts began identifying a rare breed of 1997 dimes, those that had somehow escaped the friction and abuse of circulation, or had been struck in a way that made them true outliers. One such coin surfaced in Arizona, found by a woman going through a jar of coins her late grandfather had saved. At first, she thought nothing of it. The coin appeared clean and bright, sharper than the rest, and she set it aside. Weeks later, at a coin show, she presented it to a dealer who immediately recognized its potential. Sent in for grading, the dime returned as an MS-69 with full bands, a pristine example with flawless definition across the torch's horizontal lines on the reverse. When it was auctioned months later, it fetched a staggering $78,000, changing the woman's view of coin collecting forever. In another case, a dealer in Kentucky stumbled upon a 1997 Roosevelt dime with a dramatic off-center strike. The coin's design was visibly misaligned, with parts of Roosevelt's head cut off by the edge of the planchet. The error was authentic, the coin was untouched, and because of its rarity, it was valued at over $65,000. These finds led collectors across the country to begin closely inspecting their 1997 dimes, hoping to spot something that would set theirs apart. The most extraordinary discovery came from a collector in New Jersey who had purchased a sealed U.S. Mint bag of 1997 dimes years prior. He opened the bag decades later and began the slow process of examining each coin. Among the hundreds, one stood out immediately. The strike was unusually strong, and the coin possessed a unique toning pattern that gave it a rich, iridescent sheen, golden hues with hints of violet and teal that collectors refer to as rainbow toning. Such natural toning, caused by chemical reactions during storage, can significantly boost a coin's appeal. That particular dime, graded MS-68 and boasting both full bands and eye-catching toning, ended up selling privately to a well-known collector for an astonishing $117,000, depending on grade, strike, and error status. 1997 Roosevelt dimes today can be worth anywhere from $55,000 to $120,000. These values are not hypothetical. They are based on real sales, real auctions, and real collectors who understand the significance of modern rarities. What makes the 1997 dime particularly interesting is that it comes from an era most people still consider recent. It feels modern, accessible, even ordinary. But it's precisely this era of assumed commonness that hides coins of enormous value. Collectors are now paying closer attention to post-1990 coins, realizing that minting practices during those years, while technologically improved, were not immune to error. And because many people overlooked these coins as too new to be collectible, they were spent, pocketed, or lost. Finding one in pristine, untouched condition is like finding a time capsule, something that slipped through the cracks, shielded from the wear of everyday life. The full bands designation remains the gold standard for Roosevelt dime collectors. It refers to the bands across the torch on the reverse being fully struck and separated. On modern coins, achieving this level of detail is difficult due to die wear and production speed. When a 1997 dime earns the full bands label, especially at grades of MS-67 or higher, it becomes instantly valuable. Add to that any unusual error, double die, off-center strike, planchet anomaly, and the coin's worth multiplies. Today, as coin roll hunters scour bank boxes and estate sales for hidden treasures, the 1997 Roosevelt dime has become one of the most sought-after coins from the late 20th century. It teaches collectors not to overlook the small or the familiar. Because within that little dime, barely larger than a thumbnail, may lie a value far beyond what anyone expects. So, the next time you come across spare change in your car console or a handful of coins in an old jar, take a closer look. Look for the date. Look for the strike. Look for those full bands. Because tucked inside the common can be the exceptional. And that 1997 dime you nearly ignored? It might just be worth a fortune waiting to be rediscovered. In 1990, America was a country in motion. The Cold War was ending, technology was transforming faster than anyone could predict, and the winds of a new global economy were stirring. Amid all of this, millions of dimes were being minted and circulated through the hands of people unaware that some of them, hidden among the most ordinary of coins, would one day rise to become treasures worth tens of thousands of dollars. The Roosevelt dime, ever present in American change, may have been a small coin in size, but in 1990, a select few carried a value far beyond their physical form. The Roosevelt dime had been minted since 1946 as a tribute to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was both practical and symbolic, embodying strength, unity, and American resilience. By 1990, it was a coin everyone knew but rarely noticed. It was flipped into payphones, dropped into arcade machines, and stored in desk drawers across the country. But unbeknownst to the public, a rare category of these 1990 dimes would one day command the attention of serious collectors, appraisers, and auction houses. Minted primarily at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, the 1990 dimes bore the respective P and D mint marks. The San Francisco Mint also produced proof versions of the coin, primarily for collectors. These coins were supposed to be flawless, mirror-like, and struck with higher precision than regular circulation dimes. It was within this contrast, between high production volume and the expectation of perfection, that the seeds of rarity were sown. Because in the massive machinery of minting, even the smallest inconsistency could lead to a coin worth thousands. One of the most fascinating discoveries came in the early 2000s when a sharp-eyed collector in Michigan came across a 1990 dime that looked unusually crisp. It had been part of a proof set, untouched, uncirculated, and forgotten inside a sealed case. What caught his eye wasn't just the condition, it was the fact that it lacked a mint mark entirely. This wasn't a casual oversight. This was a legitimate mint error, and one that the numismatic community would later confirm. The dime had somehow been released without the S mark that should have signaled it was a proof coin. With only a handful of such dimes known to exist, it quickly became a sensation. When this coin was eventually sold, it fetched over $100,000. As the years passed, other examples of rare 1990 dimes surfaced. One collector in California found a coin with a double die obverse. This meant that during minting, the design was struck twice, creating a ghostly doubling effect on Roosevelt's profile and the inscriptions. Though subtle, this error was distinct and verifiable. When graded MS-68 by a leading authority, the coin's value soared, eventually reaching close to $62,000 at auction. Another dime, discovered in near-perfect condition with a full bands designation, meaning the bands across the torch on the reverse were fully defined and unbroken, achieved a sale price of over $120,000 due to its immaculate strike and flawless preservation. These stories aren't just isolated flukes. They are examples of how, within the realm of coin collecting, even the most common denominations can hide unexpected fortune. Depending on condition, error, and strike quality, a 1990 Roosevelt dime today can be valued between $60,000 and $124,000. And the key to unlocking that value often lies in the smallest details: how well the coin was struck, whether it bears an error, and how well it has been preserved over time. The full bands designation in particular has become a benchmark for collectors. The bands on the torch are fine, detailed lines that often blur due to worn dies or high-speed production. When a coin displays these bands in complete clarity, it's a sign that the die was fresh, the strike was perfect, and the coin has survived without damage. Combine full bands with high mint state grades like MS-67 or MS-68, and suddenly a 10-cent piece becomes a six-figure collectible. There was even a mysterious case in Texas involving a 1990 dime that had been struck on a planchet meant for a foreign coin. The size was slightly off, and the weight didn't match U.S. standards. After thorough verification, experts concluded that a mix-up at the mint had caused a Roosevelt dime to be struck on a blank intended for a coin from another country. That unusual error transformed what could have been discarded as a reject into a prized rarity that eventually sold for nearly $110,000. Collectors today seek out these hidden gems with relentless passion. Coin roll hunting has become a growing hobby, as people all across the country examine bank rolls and old jars for coins that might just be worth a fortune. The beauty of the 1990 dime is that it sits right on the edge of modern and vintage. It's recent enough to still be in circulation, but old enough to produce genuine rarities due to minting methods that have since evolved. The Roosevelt dime is a lesson in humility for collectors. It reminds us that the value of a coin isn't in its shine or fame, but in the rare convergence of history, craftsmanship, error, and preservation. A dime like the 1990 Roosevelt can tell stories, spark treasure hunts, and even change lives. So if you ever find a 1990 dime in your wallet, don't dismiss it. Look closely. Examine the mint mark, or lack of one. Inspect the strike. Consider the sharpness of the design. Because you just might be holding a coin worth more than many cars or even homes. You just might be holding a piece of history that slipped past millions of eyes, waiting for yours to recognize it. You just might be one dime away from an extraordinary discovery.